Good evening and welcome to Copperfield's Books virtual event with Tenae Stewart. My name is Jamie Madsen and I'm the Marketing and Events Coordinator here at Copperfield's Books, and I will also be your host for the evening. Copperfield's Books has been committed to literature, education, and creating community together since our founding in 1981. I like to take a moment at the beginning of our Zoom events to thank each and every one of you for supporting us through COVID-19. It has been such a struggle, as I'm sure many of you can attest to, and we at Copperfields are very grateful, so thank you. And just a couple of housekeeping items before I introduce tonight's author. We will be using the chat box to provide links to view upcoming Copperfields events, links to purchase tonight's title, as well as a 10% discount code for use on our website. And we'll also include my contact details for post-event information. Additionally, the Q&A box will be your go-to tonight with any questions or comments for the speaker. The format will feature between 30 to 45 minutes of speaking, and then will be followed by the live Q&A. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see an icon that says Q&A. Please submit your questions here rather than replying to my posts in the chat box. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce tonight's author, Tenae Stewart. Tenae Stewart has been a practicing cottage witch for nearly a decade and is known online as the Witch of Lupine Hollow. A guide to practicing self-care rituals and expressing self-love through the power of witchcraft and astrology, Tenae believes that magic and witchcraft are tools to help us understand ourselves better. As a professional witch and an avid astrologer, she knows it is her sole purpose to seek and share wisdom around sanctuary and sacred space, nourishing rituals and independent self-love, all with a magical and bewitching twist. Tenae is with us tonight to discuss her new book, The Modern Witch's Guide to Magical Self-Care. And I know we're all excited to dive in. It's the night before Halloween. It's a perfect topic. So I won't ramble anymore. I'm just going to hand it over to you, Tenae, and take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. So I'm Tenae, and I'm here to talk about my new book, as Jamie said, The Modern Witch's Guide to Magical Self-Care. I have props. And we're going to be talking about the kind of like underlying structure that the book is based on, which is a structure for creating rituals that are really fulfilling and nourishing for you personally, that really nurture your unique needs, because we all have our own very specific needs that fall into a few different areas of our lives. And so I'm going to be talking about that underlying structure. But I also want to, kind of tailor this to what everyone who's here with us live is interested in. So I am going to probably at the end of my little talk, I'm going to take you through and read through one of the suggested rituals in the book. So I would love to hear in the chat if you're most interested in hearing a ritual that is about the mind and body, or about intuition, or about nature, or about devotion. Those are the 4 categories of suggested rituals that I have in the book. So drop in the chat which one of those you'd be most interested in hearing about. We'll take a little poll. And then at the end of my main talk, we'll go through one of the rituals based on what you guys are interested in.
Real quick. Yeah. You said mind, body, nature. What are the
intuition or devotion?
Okay, great. I'm going to put that in the chat. Bye.
Perfect. Okay, so as Jamie mentioned, I consider myself to be a practicing cottage witch, which really just means that my personal spiritual practice, my magic, my witchcraft, and my rituals are really centered around sanctuary and sacred space. So my sacred space is really important to me. My home is really important to me. And so my spiritual practice is really centered around having a warm, cozy, comfortable, safe, sacred space. But that doesn't kind of preclude me from being able to practice in lots of different ways. And so in my own practice, I work with the moon phases. I work with the seasons a lot. I work with herbalism, especially I make my own tea blends. I work with astrology. As Jamie mentioned, astrology is a big part of my practice and a big part of the work that I do. And I also practice yoga, is also a part of my practice. And so, I have all of these different areas, but I consider myself to be a cottage witch because that's really the center, the heart of my practice is that desire for sanctuary and for sacred space. So not when I first started practicing, but several years in, I was really having a difficult time sticking with my rituals. I knew that I really wanted to have a daily ritual, a morning ritual when I got up in the morning, an evening ritual before I went to bed. And I think that's a dream that a lot of us have, that we want to have that kind of spiritual and connected structure in our lives. But it can be harder than it sounds, right? It can be harder to stick with something like that because we have busy lives. Our schedules are often changing. We have a lot of responsibilities or obligations. And so this concept of self-care has become really trendy in recent years, to the point that we can kind of become a little dismissive of it because we think, oh, what do bubble baths and manicures really do for us? But the real reason that this book is specifically about self-care is because self-care is not just about taking care of your physical body. It's not just about pampering yourself. It's about taking care of all of your needs, which I kind of classify as physical needs, mental health needs, emotional needs, and spiritual needs. And so anytime we're neglecting any one of those areas, we are, really neglecting our whole selves in a way because we're not fulfilling all of the needs that we have. And so I found that I was having a really difficult time sticking with my rituals, especially my morning rituals at the time. Like, I'm not a morning person. And I had a really hard time getting up before work and having enough time to actually do a ritual, to know what I was going to do, to know why I was doing it. And so I would end up, going weeks or months without really doing any kind of ritual. And so I ended up creating this structure for myself that I then eventually ended up turning into courses and that I use with my clients, and that is now in a book format. But that I originally created very much for myself to help me create rituals that were going to be sustainable, that I was going to be able to stick with, and that were going to be really supportive of my personal needs and interests. Because although self-care is not always something that we actually want to do, sometimes we're kind of resistant to it. We're resistant to taking care of ourselves. We're resistant to taking care of our needs. Self-care is something that should be appealing, that should feel fun, because although, yes, sometimes we got to do some things we don't necessarily want to do to take care of ourselves, it is really important that we want to practice our rituals, that we want to engage with our spirituality. Anytime we start to feel like, I don't really want to do that, it's probably not going to be sustainable, right? We're probably not going to stick with it. And so our rituals have to kind of tick all these boxes. They have to fulfill all of our needs as best as they can. They have to fit into our real lives. They can't be these elaborate, crazy things that we're never actually going to have time for. And they have to be something we actually really do want to do. And so I created this structure to kind of fulfill all of those different areas for myself, that now I am sharing with you in my new book. So that structure is what I call the Pillars of Divinity. And the reason that it's called the Pillars of Divinity is because this is really rooted in the idea of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. Or what you might call the yin energy and the yang energy, because it's really very much not gender specific. It's not about male and female. It's about active energy and receptive energy. And so the idea of self-care itself is receptive energy. It's feminine or yin energy, that it's about nurturing, it's about nourishing ourselves, it's about rest, it's about taking time to, fill our own cup. But we also need that divine masculine or yang or active energy to keep us motivated and to keep us on track, because that sustainability piece starts to come in where, if it's something that doesn't really fit into our schedule, or if it's something that we're not really that interested in, that doesn't really appeal to us that much, we're probably not going to be motivated to take the action and actually do the thing that we said we wanted to do. And so I created this structure of the Pillars of Divinity to kind of bring all of these different concepts together in one really pretty simple way. Because simplicity is a really important thing to me in my practice, and in the work that I do, is really helping people to embody simplicity in their rituals, in their self-care, because as soon as we get too complicated, as soon as we're not sure why we're doing something, we're just kind of going through the motions because someone said we were supposed to, versus it's really something that deeply resonates and fulfills you, then, we fall off track because of that. So the Pillars of Divinity is this structure that is basically 5 different categories that you can create different areas of your practice, your spiritual practice, your practice as a witch, if you identify as a witch, although you don't need to use this structure. It's 5 categories that you can create different areas of your practice that are really designed to fulfill different needs that you have. And then you can kind of mix and match those to create your actual rituals, whether those are morning rituals, evening rituals, rituals to celebrate the moon phases. In addition to it being Halloween tomorrow, it's also the full moon, which is very rare. So this is a particularly magical time to be learning about this. So maybe you're going to do a full moon ritual. Or maybe you're doing a seasonal ritual that, we celebrate the seasons as witches as well. So whatever types of rituals you're interested in, you can use this basic structure to make sure that your rituals are really specifically fulfilling your unique needs. So those 5 pillars are the pillar of mind, first off. So I start with the pillar of the mind because the mind, your mind, is one of the few tools that we always have with us. So you'll find when you research witchcraft, you'll find that there's a lot of things that you are supposed to do or tools that you are supposed to have. And I always call that out, that is not true. You don't need any tools actually to practice witchcraft. I was just talking with a friend earlier today that, witchcraft is not about the aesthetic, it's about the spiritual connection. Sometimes though, it's about the aesthetic. It's about the things that bring you joy and that light you up. So, crystals and candles and, all of the different witchy tools that you might be drawn to. If you're drawn to something, then perfect. Yes, you should use it. But we always have to remember that the tools are not required. The only tools we actually need are our mind and body, which we always have with us. And so that's why the first 2 pillars, actually, sneak peek, are the pillar of the mind and the pillar of the body. So the pillar of the mind is a very broad category because this is anything in your spiritual practice and in your rituals that fulfills your desire to be inspired, or that, stimulates you intellectually, or that requires you to kind of go into your mind and explore that part of yourself. So I always love to hear what people's different pillars are as they create their practice. And then I always like to share, different ideas that I've heard people use for their different pillars. So some suggestions for the pillar of your mind, and you'll find lots more suggestions in the book, are things like meditation. Meditation is a great one. Also journaling, where you're actually, kind of like putting your thoughts out onto paper. Aromatherapy is a great one for the pillar of the mind because actually I think it's 3. Yeah, 3 of the 5 senses fall into the pillar of the mind: the sense of smell, so aromatherapy, the sense of sight, and the sense of sound. And so sound healing, singing bowls, things like that, or ringing bells, anything that engages those senses is perfect for working with the pillar of the mind because they stimulate us intellectually, they stimulate us mentally. Now, things like I said, journaling or just like talk therapy, that sort of thing can be great for the pillar of the mind as well. The mind is obviously very much also about our mental health needs. So really making sure that we have those bases covered because our mental health is really the foundation of everything. And so creating your rituals kind of from that foundation up is a really great way to get started. So then our second pillar, as I mentioned, is the pillar of the body. So your body is the second tool that you always have with you. And what's interesting is I think a lot of times we kind of neglect this as an area of spiritual practice because we think of things that engage our body as being, not very magical necessarily. Maybe exercise or eating a healthy diet, things like that can actually be very spiritual because many religions, many spiritualities talk about the body as a temple. And so really bringing that connection to our own bodies into our spiritual practice and into our rituals is a really powerful way to kind of connect with that energy and with the power of your own body. And so this is something that I think a lot of people are really reclaiming is the power, the magic, the sensuality of our own bodies as being something really sacred. And so working with the pillar of the body, you can do those really kind of seemingly mundane things like, eating a healthy diet or exercising. It might be, gentle exercise, something like yoga. It might be cardio. Cardio can totally be part of your spiritual practice if that's what really lights you up. And I think that's where sometimes I tend to differ a little bit in the way that I teach about creating ritual is that anything can be a ritual. It doesn't necessarily need to be obviously spiritual. It can be anything that feels fulfilling for you and helps you to feel connected to your mind, connected to your body, and connected to spirit and intuition. So some other ideas for the pillar of the body are the other two senses, right? So taste and touch. So touch can be like self-massage, or it can also be things like holding crystals, where you can meditate and hold a crystal or place crystals on your body, which can help you to really tune into your body. There's also in the book, I also share a body scan meditation, which kind of covers both mind and body, and is where you really tune in and you become very aware of each part of your body. And it can be very grounding. It can really help you to drop in and be much more conscious and aware of your physical self. And this is one of the places where I think a lot of spiritual people, a lot of us tend to get kind of disconnected from our bodies because we spend a lot of time either in our heads or in our intuition. And so focusing on this pillar of the body is a great way to kind of ground and come back to center. And then, of course, we can also use the sense of taste. So creating a beautiful meal, drinking teas, or working with seasonal plants and herbs, things like that. Those can all be actually a pillar of the body because they're helping us to connect with our physical self or to nourish our physical self. So those two are kind of the most tangible of the five pillars. So from here, then we move into the pillar of intuition. So our self-care really, at the very least, needs to nourish our mind, our body, and our intuition, because these are kind of the three core parts of ourselves. We have our mental health, we have our emotional health, and we have our spiritual health. And so your intuition is, I like to talk about it as one of a couple of internal voices, right? That we all have a voice that tells us whether something is right or wrong. And that's our conscience. And that's something that really is very societal, that comes from outside of ourselves as to what we believe to be right or wrong. And then we have our ego, which is the part of us that is always trying to protect us, that's trying to keep us from harm, trying to keep us safe. And so there's a voice that's telling us, no, don't go down that path, or yes, go this way. But then there's our intuition, and our intuition kind of overrides both of those when we allow it to, because your intuition is the voice that comes fully from inside of you. It's not really conditioned, not in the way that the others are. That your intuition is the voice that tells you whether something is right or wrong specifically for you. So it's not worried about society. It's not worried about if it's safe or not. It's worried about, is this right for you? And so tuning in and trusting your intuition is one of the most important things you can do pretty much in general in life, but especially if you're going to be creating a spiritual practice and creating rituals, because your intuition is going to point you in the right direction. It's going to help you to know what truly is right for you. And so the pillar of intuition can go in a lot of different ways in terms of how you want to nourish it in your practice. Dreamwork is a really great way to work with your intuition. We all have dreams, or most of us have dreams that we remember, right? At least once in a while. And so you can actually really train yourself to start remembering your dreams by writing them down. And by, even when you don't remember them, writing down the date and saying, I don't remember. And sometimes you might have to do that for like a few days or a few weeks. But slowly your brain will start to recognize that, oh, this is something important. This is something I'm supposed to be paying attention to. And so tuning into your dreams is a great way to nourish your intuition, because that's something that is fully contained inside of you. It's your dreams, it's your interpretation of them, it's you training yourself to remember them. So dream work is a great option. Another good option is any kind of divination. So you might work with tarot cards or with oracle cards. You might work with a pendulum. You might work with runes. Whatever calls to you, whatever you're interested in learning about, divination is a great way to tap into and nourish your intuition as well. Because what divination tools like this really do is, or at least I believe, that they are really just a channel for you to come to the understanding of what it is you already know. So your intuition is always inside of you. You always pretty much know what's right for you, but sometimes we can get kind of off track, or we can get distracted. A lot of times we can get distracted by those other voices, by, your ego trying to keep you safe from something, or from your conscience that's, been socially conditioned to believe a certain way, whether or not that way is actually right for you. And so sometimes we can be kind of like torn. We don't really know what our intuition is telling us. And so working with divination tools is a great way to access and learn to really trust your intuition, because it's going to give you a sign. It's going to give you a clear sign. If you pull a tarot card, it's going to be some symbols, some words, some messages for you to decipher and to interpret for yourself. And so that's a really great way for you to then start to be able to learn what those messages are and learn how your intuition speaks through you. So that's why the third pillar of divinity is the pillar of intuition. So those are the three kind of core parts of self-care. But there are two more pillars remaining. So this is where we can get a little bit deeper and a little bit even more witchy, right? So the fourth pillar of divinity is the pillar of nature. Now, this one might seem slightly out of place, but I have included it in here very intentionally. So I've done lots of surveys of my audience, of my email list. I have lots of people on Facebook and Instagram, that sort of thing. And every time I do a survey or ask these sorts of questions about why do you want to be a witch, or what does it mean to be a witch to you? Every time I ask those kinds of questions, I get a whole bunch of people who say that for them, it means having some kind of connection to nature. And that is so true for me. I can only speak for myself, but I can definitely say it's true for me as well. And the reason for that is because a lot of what we do as witches, kind of like the general structure that most witches, although not all, follow, is very much influenced by the seasons and by the moon phases, which are also both very deeply connected to astrology as well. Astrology is kind of the common thread that links the moon phases and the seasons. And so these three different systems together are really, they make up the cycles of nature, and those cycles impact us very deeply. They impact our moods, they impact our intuition, they impact how we feel on a daily basis and on a monthly or annual basis. And so the pillar of nature is about making sure that we have that connection to the natural world. So the first three pillars are very much about being connected to ourselves and understanding what we need. But the pillar of nature is taking it outside of ourselves. It's saying we also need to be connected to the world around us. And so the pillar of nature can, like the others, be manifested in your own life in a lot of different ways. It might be working with the seasons, it might be working with the moon phases. It might be working with herbalism, growing your own plants and using them to make teas or things like that. It might be nature journaling or, hiking, going out and spending time in nature. Whatever it is, whether it's your own backyard, whether it's your, little potted plants on your balcony, on your apartment, whether it's a national forest, however it is that you get to spend time in nature, having that built into your spiritual practice is going to help you have, see how you're part of the bigger picture, see where you fit in, and to kind of remind us that there is so much outside of ourselves. So it's created very intentionally that the first three pillars are very much about making sure we know what we need and taking care of our physical and our mental selves. But then we got to remember to take it outside of ourselves as well, which brings us to the final pillar, the fifth pillar, which is probably my favorite. And that is the pillar of devotion. So a lot of times when I talk about the pillar of devotion, people immediately go to working with a deity or a god or goddess. And that definitely can be the case. If you feel called to work with a god or goddess, whether that's the Christian or Jewish god, whether that's a Roman or Greek goddess, whether that's a goddess from your personal heritage, whoever it is that you're drawn to, if that's what that brings up for you and you want to have that devotion to a god or goddess, then by all means that fits in perfectly here. But a god or goddess is by no means the only thing that can fit into the pillar of devotion in your practice. So the pillar of devotion is really about becoming aware of and making sure that we are prioritizing the things that we care about most. So a lot of times I will ask friends and clients that what are you most devoted to? And it's always kind of a stumper because we immediately think, oh, I'm my family. Oh, I'm most devoted to, maybe some kind of cause or something like that. And those things are probably true. But when we really sit down, we really think like, what am I most devoted to in my life? It is something that kind of bears a little bit more contemplation, and maybe it is a deity, or maybe it's a particular cycle that you want to be really tuned into. But the pillar of devotion is very much about asking yourself that question first and foremost, and then becoming aware of what the answer is, or at least what the always evolving answer is, and then making sure that you're incorporating that thing into your practice. So for me, I consider my pillar of devotion to be following the moon phases and the seasons, because that's what really keeps me on track. That's what keeps me from getting kind of like flighty and pulled away by all of the many, many tasks and to-do lists. Because that's what helps me to be grounded, is those checkpoints of, the moon phases each week and the seasons each year. So that's what I consider to be my pillar of devotion. But I know people who have like particular cause or activism as their pillar of devotion, which I love that. Or maybe people have, like family dinner night is their pillar of devotion, wanting to spend quality time with their family. The pillar of devotion is about what you're devoted to, but it's also about making sure that we give our time and energy and attention to the thing that we're devoted to. As well as, just like I said for me, that the moon phases are a checkpoint for me. The pillar of devotion kind of goes both ways. It's what you're devoted to, and it's what supports you and helps you to be your best self. So it's also devoted to you in many ways. So the pillar of devotion is much more big picture than the other pillars. But I think it's the most interesting because it really helps us to really know what really matters to us and what really fulfills us. And perhaps most importantly, creating your 5 pillars of divinity is a process of elimination. It's a process of taking away the things that don't really matter to you, at least not in your spiritual practice. It's about taking away the things that you don't want to prioritize and making sure that what you're spending your time and your energy on every day, every morning, every evening, are things that are really fulfilling for you, are really nurturing for you, and are really helping you to fill your own cup, and really practice that self-care. So it looks like, I think the top vote for what ritual we should take a look at is an intuition ritual, which is perfect. I love that. So let me just bring up the book here. Okay. Okay, I think I'm going to share this one. Okay, so I'm going to share one of the, it's sort of a ritual, one of the rituals that is suggested in the book. So the first half of the book is basically a guide to the Pillars of Divinity and to creating your own rituals, to understanding what really resonates with you, what really fulfills you, and what you really need to include in your own unique rituals. And then the second half of the book is suggested rituals in 4 different categories. So we have one category for mind and body together, then intuition, nature, and devotion. And so there's all different sorts of recipes and tarot spreads and all different kinds of rituals for you to try out and get inspiration from. And so the one I'm going to share with you guys is actually a tea blend, which is one of my favorite things to do in my own practice. So this is a fun one for me. So this is an enlightening tea blend to awaken your intuition. Whatever your preferred divination tools are, however you like to connect with and listen to your intuition, and no matter how advanced you are with intuitive work, sometimes it's just difficult to tune out the world and tune into your higher self. Having a ritual that helps you flip the switch from your mundane day-to-day experiences to a fully connected expression of your inner witch can be really helpful. I love to work with specific tea blends that I only drink during certain motions or for certain magical workings. It really helps put me in the right mindset for expressing my spirituality in that moment. This blend is designed to help you flip that switch and awaken your intuition with the very first sip, so that you can be fully aligned and ready to listen to the messages your higher self has for you. Drink it before your next tarot reading, scrying session, or even right before bed to encourage prophetic dreams. So the ingredients for this tea blend are, this is for 1 cup, are a tablespoon of white tea leaves, which is white peony, a teaspoon of dried lavender flowers, a teaspoon of dried jasmine flowers, and a teaspoon of dried mugwort. So lavender, jasmine, and mugwort are all related to dreaming and to intuition. And jasmine and mugwort are both, I think, ruled by the moon. Lavender is ruled by Mercury. White peony is ruled by the moon as well. So this is very connected to that divine feminine, yin, receptive, intuitive, flowing energy. Okay, so combine all ingredients in a tea infuser or tea bag and place in mug. Pour hot water over and allow to steep for 2 to 3 minutes. Get comfy at your altar or somewhere peaceful where you can access your divination tools. I like to sit in bed and read my cards. Allow yourself space to sip your tea and relax into the moment before moving into your divination ritual. Taking this extra 5 minutes for yourself can really put you in the right mindset to receive even more powerful intuitive downloads. So that's just one example of 36 rituals suggested in the book, as well as lots and lots of guides on creating your own rituals. But that kind of gives you a good insight into the types of rituals that I create for myself and that I recommend in this book. Is they're very simple, they're very grounded and very easy and down to earth, but they're very accessible, but they're very potent and magical. I really believe that the simpler the ritual, the more potent and magical it has the potential to be, because simple rituals are the things that help us to really tune in on a daily basis. having a big elaborate full moon ritual or Samhain Halloween ritual, that's great. And that is really fun, once or twice or a couple times a year. But most of us really just don't have time to do that all the time. Or even if we do have the time, we struggle to make the time for it, right? Probably more accurately. And so having these really simple, grounded daily rituals can help us to have those magical experiences all the time instead of, maybe once or twice a year when we make time for them. So I hope that that is supportive for all of you and that you got some good stuff out of that for creating your own rituals. There's a link in the chat that Jamie dropped in to pick up a copy of the book and to get 10% off with the code MAGIC, which is good through November 6th. So definitely go and pick it up. I'm really, really happy and excited that the book is available through Copperfields. I am a local author. I'm here in Santa Rosa. And, Copperfields, I've been going to Copperfields my entire life. So, I love that the book is actually here in our local bookstore and that I can tell people, you can pick up my book at Copperfields. That's just really fun and exciting. Copperfields is a staple of my life and of my reading world. And yeah, like I said, I've been going there my entire life. I grew up around here, and Copperfields is absolutely a staple. So I would love to take some questions if you guys want to drop them in the Q&A. Okay, great. We're getting some in here. All right. Okay. So Rachel asks, where is the best place to get supplies for teas? Would it be health food stores? Yeah, actually health food stores would be a great option. If you have like a local indie store, that's great. Or, really even like Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, whatever is accessible to you and whatever's close to you. They usually do have like dried herbs and dried teas and things like that. If you don't have something like that around you, or if your health food store doesn't stock what you're looking for, I recommend there is and this is just somewhere I shop myself. There's a store online called Mountain Rose Herbs. So I know Rachel is not local, so I'm going to recommend something online. Rachel's all the way over in Australia. So yeah, Mountain Rose Herbs is really great for that. But for everyone who's local and is in Sonoma County, highly, highly recommend Rosemary's Garden. Just down the street from Copperfields in Sebastopol, they have a great selection. That's where I get all of my herbs for teas. Okay. Okay, Michelle asks, are there certain rituals you do in groups to bring a deeper connection to any of the pillars? That's a great question. So for me, when I do like group things, mostly I practice on my own, but I have a few friends that we gather casually to practice occasionally. And then I do practice online with my own clients. And usually those are for occasions, right? So it'll be like for the full moon or for the seasonal sabbats, which are festivals throughout the year that many witches celebrate to mark the seasons. And so a lot of times it is about the pillar of nature in that sense, that it's about celebration and coming together to gather and celebrate the marking, the passing of the month, the passing of the moon phases or the passing of the seasons. So yeah, I would say that the pillar of nature probably lends itself best to a group setting. But intuition rituals can be great too, coming together and reading tarot together or reading tarot for each other can be really fun as well. So that can be, even though I think intuition is a very deeply personal thing, sometimes bouncing off of each other and having someone to interpret with can inspire you in new ways and in other ways. Okay, Carrie asks, I am wondering if you have any insights about current astrological events. Absolutely, that's my favorite topic. Astrology is, I could have done this whole thing just on astrology too. It's always a toss-up if that's what I'm gonna do. So yeah, what's currently happening astrologically is actually kind of a big deal. We have a lot going on. So right now, well, two things. So first of all, tomorrow is the full moon in Taurus. So something that is, I think, really transformational to understand is that the full moon, so you'll always see like stuff online about, oh, the full moon is in Taurus, oh, the full moon is in Aries or whatever, right? The full moon is always in the astrological sign that is opposite of the sun, because the full moon happens when the sun and moon are exactly opposite. That's the only way we can actually have a full moon, is that the sun is shining on the full face of the moon because they're directly across from one another. And so the sun is in Scorpio right now. We're in Scorpio season. So if we have any Scorpio birthdays, you know that it's the sun is in Scorpio this time of year. And so the full moon around Halloween is always in Taurus, because Taurus is the opposite sign of Scorpio. So the full moon in Taurus is happening tomorrow, which is really significant because, first of all, it's actually happening on Halloween, which is, yes, it's a fun secular holiday, but it's also a very magical spiritual holiday for many witches and for many spiritual people. And so it's very much connected to our ancestors and to spirits and that sort of thing. And so the full moon in Taurus actually happening on Halloween only happens once every 18 to 19 years. So this is a very magical portal that we're entering into right now. And the full moon happens to be conjunct Uranus in Taurus. So conjunct means that two planets are right next to each other. And so the full moon and Uranus are going to be together. And that's really significant because Uranus is the sign of change, of rebellion. And very unexpected things tend to happen when Uranus is in play. It's also very connected to politics. So having this full moon conjunct Uranus right before the election, there's going to be some unexpected stuff that comes up in the next few days, most likely. So that's the first big thing. The other big thing is we have some retrogrades happening right now. So Mercury has been retrograde for a couple of weeks. Mercury actually stations direct on election day on the 3rd. So Mercury retrograde is a period when the planet Mercury appears to move backwards in the sky. It happens 3 times a year. It does tend to cause like travel problems and technology problems, things like that. But what it's really about is asking us to reevaluate the way that we are communicating, the way that we are choosing to move through the world. And so Mercury has been retrograde in Scorpio, the sign of revelations and witchcraft and the occult, for a couple weeks. So we've probably all had some big stuff coming up around that, some questions for ourselves or for people around us. And at the same time, we've also had Mars retrograde. So Mars retrograde, when Mars appears to move backwards, is much less frequent than Mercury. It only happens once about every 2 years. And Mars has been retrograde since September. It'll be going direct about 10 days after the election. And Mars retrograde, first of all, it's in Aries, which is the home sign of Mars. So it's like the god, the planet of war in the sign of war. It's like big, big motivation, but big transformational. A lot of it has to do with motivation, actually, in this case, that we've probably felt kind of held back in our motivations, or maybe we've struggled to make things happen for the last couple of months, but Mars is going to be stationing direct soon. So we're probably going to get a forward momentum of some new energy and some new motivation, and maybe some new action happening. So those are the big things, the retrogrades wrapping up, and this big full moon tomorrow. So I hope that answers your question, Carrie. Okay, Rachel asks, how often do you change the focus of your pillars? Great question. And I'm glad you brought that up because it's a good one to address. So for me, I almost never change my pillars, very rarely. So to me, I think the ideal is to really take your time creating your pillars, which the book will definitely help you walk through making that happen. To really take your time and to really feel into it, because although we have lots of diverse interests and we have lots of things we might want to play with and experiment with, your pillars don't hold you back from doing that. So if you create your 5 pillars that are the most core, most essential parts of your practice, the things that you most need to feel fulfilled, that's probably not going to change too much, okay? Not too much over the years, because our core, our heart, our soul, like doesn't really change that much. What changes is our circumstances and our environment. So your schedule might change, your partner's or your kids' schedule might change. The seasons changing can have a big impact on us. And so your pillars, ideally, your pillars are going to be the foundation, the strong center that's not going to change too much about your practice. What's probably going to change and should change fairly frequently is how you're expressing them in your rituals. You might need to mix up how long your rituals are, or exactly when you're doing them, or the space you're doing them in, depending on your environment, your schedule, the seasons, etc. So ideally, you would create your 5 pillars and then you would pretty much stick with them. But your ritual structures are going to change around them. However, the caveat to that is, first of all, sometimes we learn about something that we didn't know about when we created our rituals and created our pillars, and we're like, oh my God, this totally opens up a whole new world, and this is actually the thing that really resonates with me. In that case, yeah, change your pillars, ditch the thing that wasn't actually working, and fit in the new thing that you've learned about. But just, I always like to remind you to think of your pillars as something that's very foundational, and not just like, oh, I'm interested in this right now. Like, you can practice and experiment with whatever you want, no matter what your pillars are. Your pillars are really a place to come back to, a place for stability and sustainability. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, Virginia asks, to clean your crystals with the full moon, do they need to be outside, or can you put them on a windowsill? You can totally put them on a windowsill. No big deal. I'm actually really bad about remembering to do that. And I need to do it tonight. Thanks for the reminder. Yeah, really, anytime that we have a question of like, oh, like, does this have to be this way? No, probably not. Almost never. I always like to say there are no rules in witchcraft. There's no rules in your spiritual practice. There are some paths, some specific traditions that do have their own rules that you might need to be initiated into or something like that. But if you're not following one of those paths, then there are no rules. So, anytime there's an if or a do I have to question, the answer is go with your intuition. If it feels right, if it feels fine to put them on the windowsill, then that's perfect. Okay. And for anyone who doesn't know, at the full moon, a lot of times many people will put their crystals outside or on the windowsill in the moonlight, because it's considered a safe way to clean them. And to clear them of energy, because a lot of crystals can't go in water or shouldn't go in water. So moonlight is used as a cleansing tool. Okay, Carrie asks, thank you for the response about astrology. I have my moon in Taurus. Oh, lovely. Taurus. She says, I'm also in Sonoma County, and I'm curious to know if you have any suggestions for virtual groups to practice rituals. Yeah. Okay. So I'm not super up on like Sonoma County groups necessarily. I have my own, personal friends that I gather with. But I know that there's a few groups. I was on Meetup, and was, I always saw some good postings on that. So I recommend checking Meetup out. And then also, Jamie had asked me to share about what I do. So this is a perfect segue. So I lead rituals myself. I have a couple of different virtual groups that I lead rituals in, and that I kind of bring friends and colleagues in to lead rituals for us as well. So I'm going to drop my website in the chat here, so that you guys can check it out. And yeah, I lead rituals we do rituals for the sabbats, the seasons, in one of my groups, and we do rituals for the full moon in the other group that I have. The one group is called the Starlight Coven. The other group is called the Embodied Witch Inner Circle, which is kind of like an upgraded premium version of the Starlight Coven. So I offer things. I also recommend checking out, like I said, Meetup. And my friend Rebecca Sang, now her business name is escaping me, but if you look her up, she sometimes, I don't know if she's doing virtual stuff right now, but she is great. She's in the Bay Area, and she leads really beautiful rituals as well, and women's circles and things like that. So I hope that's helpful. Okay, all right, that is all of the questions we have. So if you have any final ones, drop them in. Great questions. Thank you, guys.
That was fantastic. I feel like I could listen to you talk all night long. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And, I always like to tell authors that people have been chatting to me and just thanking us. There's been amazing feedback. So thank you to all of
Oh,
you
good.
writing in, and it's been really enjoyable. So just to let all of you on here know, I will be sending a follow-up email tomorrow that will include a YouTube link to this recording. It will include Tenae's website, as well as links to purchase her book and the discount code. So just, if you just watch tonight, it's okay. Everything will be in your inbox tomorrow. And with that, Tenae, I'd love it if you took us out.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's great questions. Rachel shared in the questions that the book is lovely and she's really enjoyed reading it. So thank you for that. It's been so exciting and so wonderful. The book's only actually been out for about 3 weeks, and just seeing all of the feedback and people sharing about it, it's been really, really exciting. So this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us. And hopefully in the near future, we can get you in person because you're right down the street. So
Hopefully.
great. Well, everyone have a great evening. Have a safe holiday. And yeah, we'll see you next time.
All right. Happy Halloween.
You too.